Hello, and welcome to another episode of Enough Said. I'm your host, Cedric Newburn, and I'm delighted to talk to you about a variety of topics, things ranging from relationship to entrepreneurship to how do we work together? How do we get past some of our own issues and hurdles to make our lives more successful for ourselves? And today I want to talk to you about something that I've struggled with throughout my career. And it's this new buzz phrase that they called imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is, you're hearing much more about it these days, but it truly has been a challenge for me. And the definition is for imposter syndrome is an internal psychological experience of feeling like a like a phony in some area of your life, despite any successes that you may have achieved in that area. You might have imposter syndrome if you find yourself consistently experiencing self-doubt, even in areas where you typically excel. So now I grew up in an era where there was a lot of conversation about fake it until you make it, right? You just you figure it out because oftentimes you may not have the experience you need. You may not have the connections that would make the transition into the new role or into a new space the easiest process for you. All of those things, yes, oftentimes you had to walk into a room and fake it until you made it. But what if you've already made it? What if you have more experience than anyone else in the room and you feel like you're still faking it? That's been me. I have felt uncomfortable because I assume others see me differently than the reality of who I am. Now, I'm going to do another episode that talks about, being alone in a room filled with people because I've been that way more often than I care to even imagine to share with you. It's a challenge. Often people may perceive you and your difference as, let's say, a lack of skills, a lack of experience, your age, you name it. I remember being the youngest person in the room quite often when I first started out my career, and a lot of people would challenge me. Oh, you don't know, just, give it time. You haven't been here long enough to know how this works. Just give it some time. And then of course, as I'd been there for a while, then all of a sudden I still didn't know enough. I can imagine many of you have experienced that as well. And then if we throw in some other demographic filters, let's say you have you're part of a different culture. English is not your first language. If you have some neurological challenges, right, or other disabilities that are preventing you maybe from speaking the way that others speak in a room, people might discount you and your abilities, your skills, your knowledge, and your experience. I remember having many times throughout my career where someone may have said something or did something that just made me feel that I was not welcomed in that space, even though I had the experience. So two examples come to mind that I want to share with you. Early on in my career, I was working in nonprofit, had majored in marketing and was working in an area that frankly was a bit challenged. And yet I was able to overcome those challenges, doing some unique things from a marketing perspective, helping to grow donations and participation at that nonprofit. And ironically, when there was an opportunity to, let's say, divide and conquer the team that was in place at that time, there was a target on my back. And I had a VP sit across from my desk and tell me, Cedric, you don't know anything about marketing. It's obvious that you don't. And now keep in mind, I'm in my mid 20s at this point, and so I hadn't developed the wherewithal, I guess, to stand up and point out where let's just say his perceptions of me did not meet the reality. I went into little boy mode defending myself. Like, that's not fair. And I don't believe that you would say that. But I, in fact, had proven that my ability to market that organization had been successful, given that there were limited resources to support my efforts. When I talk about a shoestring budget, I literally mean trading shoestrings, right? To try to get media coverage and get exposure and putting on concerts that raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. And yet I didn't know anything about marketing. Well, as luck would have it, I decided at that time it was time for me to go ahead and work on my MBA anyway. So I did. And then a couple of years later, I found myself in a marketing position with a Fortune 50 company. And I started traveling the Southeast, helping small business owners put together marketing campaigns. I was working with local media to develop marketing programs for those small businesses. And then I found myself a few short years later in the DC area leading the marketing department within this Fortune 50 company with big deals with the professional football teams in the DC, Maryland area and across Virginia with colleges and so forth. And yet here, I was just told a few years ago, I knew nothing about marketing. The irony is, I literally used everything that I learned at that nonprofit and leveraged it to be successful within the Fortune 50 company. So I went from somewhere where I was tolerated to a business where I was appreciated for the knowledge and skills that I had. Let that sink in. I was told in my mid-20s that I didn't know anything about marketing. And by my early 30s, I was leading the marketing department in a region for a Fortune 50 company, and then went on into the home office where I was responsible for national media campaigns for African Americans and Asian Americans. And yet, Cedric didn't know anything about marketing. Another example, up to become I wanted to become an agent and sell insurance. And I thought, I'm almost 40 now, and it's time for me to go out on my own, be the entrepreneur that I knew I wanted to be all these years. I wanted to use the experiences in corporate to build call it my experiences and my resume so that I could go out and one day start my own business that could become a legacy that I pass on to my children. Well, lo and behold, I cash in the 401k and sit down and have a conversation with a sales leader about this opportunity to become an agent. And this person had actually gone through some trainings, knew of me because I had at that point delivered training for sales leaders across the country and develops various programs to help them in their efforts to support their agents. Now, keep in mind, at this point, I had made my way up through the ranks in corporate marketing roles. And so this individual looked at me and said, you're a great guy. I think you're really smart because I've seen some of the things you've done. I'm just concerned that you only know marketing. You've never run a business. Now, here I am thinking, is this a time loop? Because you got to be kidding me. In my mid-20s, I was told I didn't know anything about marketing. Now here I am about to turn 40, a little more than a decade later, and I'm being told at this point, I only know marketing. Difference is, at this point, I had a little more confidence in myself. Even though imposter syndrome was still real for me, I had a little more confidence. And I said to them, listen, I understand you may have concerns, but realize that I've put together processes that you have used to help your agents. I know how to build those processes so that I could do those for myself within my own business. And I kind of joked about it. I said, well, I'm just curious. Have you ever run a business before? Have you ever sold anything outside of what it took for you to be a sales leader? And I think because I said that, I nailed it. Because, of course, He approved my file and we laughed about it. But that's the truth. When you are faced with someone else's perception of who you are, how do you stand up in that moment? Do you hide behind imposter syndrome and question whether or not they have found the flaw, the kink in your armor, so to speak? Or do you stand bold knowing that you have what it takes, that you're no longer faking it until you make it? You've already made it. And so there's no more faking needed. Now, here's how you can recognize imposter syndrome. And believe me, I still to this day struggle with many of these. There's 4 P's that I found that they talk about the 4 P's of imposter syndrome. They're people pleasing, perfectionism, paralysis, and procrastination. Now, ask yourself in your profession, in your career, in education, wherever you are in life, even in your relationship, in your marriage, do you ever struggle with any of these? Are you set to please others above and beyond yourself, oftentimes at the detriment of your own happiness? Does perfectionism keep you from getting anything done because it has to be perfect before you can do it? Are you paralyzed by the details? Are you unable to move past analyzing and analyzing and analyzing to actually move forward with action? Do you procrastinate? I think we all have some elements of these, correct? I think we can all agree to that. But here's a challenge for all of us. We got to move forward. We got to push through these imposter syndrome traits. Now, here's some things that I found on Mind Tools website on how to overcome imposter syndrome. Number one, acknowledge your feelings. Simple thing you can do is keep a journal. And in that journal, write down positive statements about yourself and affirmations. Because often we are looking for others to affirm us. And in many cases, they may not even have the tools or the language to do it in a way that really gives us what we need. So do it for yourself. Write it down. In the morning, you write your goal of what you want to get accomplished that day. And in the evening, you write down what you did. And it's not a matter of saying, I didn't do this. It's a matter of saying, well, I did these 3 things, and here's the impact that they had. Number two, talk to others. This seems like a no-brainer, but often we get stuck inside our own heads, questioning our own skills and our own abilities, when all we really need to do is talk to other people, and they often will help us get past it. Now, I'll tell you, I talk to my wife all the time. Any idea I come up with, she is the first person I talk with. Okay, babe, let me help me on this one. I need your help. I need you to give me some guidance. Let me know if I'm headed in the right direction on this. There are professionals out there. There are coaches, executive coaches, counselors, therapists, you name it. There's a variety of people that you can talk with to help you get past the space of believing that you're not qualified. Number three, develop a quick response plan. Now, this goes with your positive statements, but whenever that negative self-talk starts, you got to confront it. You got to hit it head on. Instead of saying like, questioning yourself or penalizing yourself, like, why did I do that? Like Urkel, why did I do that? No. Instead, your thought should be, why did they do that? Hmm. It's an interesting twist on this, right? So now instead of it being negative thoughts about how someone perceives you, now you're questioning, why would they perceive you any other way than who you truly and authentically are? Takes the pressure off of you, and then you realize that there may be some issues, insecurities, even some, biases that exist for that person. And that's why they're saying that you are not qualified or giving you the feeling that you're not qualified. Number four, understand your strengths and weaknesses. Now, this is something fun for me because I take my students through SWOT analysis as we're looking at business opportunities in the entrepreneurship classes that I teach. And they have to do this process of understanding exactly what are their internal strengths and internal weaknesses that make this business opportunity, let's just say, maybe questionable about whether or not it's viable. And so they have to do this analysis and also look at the external factors of opportunities in the market as well as threats so that they can truly get a sense of whether or not they should move forward with their business idea. But how many of us do that with our own selves? How often do we sit and list out those things that are strengths and those things that are weaknesses? Now, I highly recommend Strength Finders. That for me was a game changer. Having done a lot of those personality tests over the years from various corporate roles that I was in, that by far was the first one that I felt spoke to who I was. Now, yes, all the rest of them did too. Let's just be honest. But the truth is, it's always easier to work within your strength model as opposed to trying to improve upon those things in which you're weak. For instance, I am right-handed. I do a lot of things with my left hand, and I could spend a lot of time focusing on getting my left hand to write as neatly as my right hand does. But what could I have accomplished in that time that I've spent working on that weakness if I had leveraged my strengths? So I encourage you to do your own personal SWOT analysis. And a big key to this is developing a support network of people who will motivate you and that you can trust to help you counter some of the negative inner critic that you have. Share that SWOT analysis with them. Number five, overcoming perfectionism. Now, this was a big one for me. Even when I'm trying to do a podcast or write a blog or do anything creative, especially, I get in this space of, oh, it has to be perfect. I want this to be flawless. I don't want any typos or I don't want to misspell or misspeak a word or any of that. But what I've come to realize that it's important that I hit the pause button. If I see myself getting wrapped around the wheel of perfectionism, I find ways to relax using various techniques and I focus on the bigger picture. I'm sure I said something within this podcast that may not be perfect, but the bigger picture is that I'm giving you tools and hopefully letting you see that you're not alone in your struggle with this space of imposter syndrome. So get over the perfectionism, set realistic, challenging, and achievable goals. Number six, last but not least, own your success. Now, first and foremost, I will tell you, as I tell my students, you define success for yourself, no one else. No one else has the ability or the right to define what success is for you. And yes, there are a lot of definitions of success, there are a lot of examples of success, but frankly, those definitions may not align with your personal goals and values. They may not align with what you want to accomplish in life. I know they don't always with mine. And so why should you try to achieve the standard that someone else has set for you? And I get it. You know, if we're working in the corporate world or we're in a classroom setting, we have to, right? There are some standards, there are some achievement marks that are required in order for us to, to get a bonus or a raise or the next promotion or the grade that we need in that class. But what if your real goal is graduation and that's all you really needed? So yes, you could really just dive in and do everything you can to get an A in that class where you're struggling. But as we say quite often, C's and D's still get degrees. So you define your own success. Define your own success. And no, I'm not saying that you can be mediocre and that, you can put forth less an effort. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But as we tell our son, if you've done the very best you can, you've laid it on the line, and then the grade that you get is not quite what you expected, at least you did your best. And for me, that is the truest definition of success. Doing your best at every chance and every opportunity you have, doing your absolute best. The outcome still may not be what you would like for it to be. You can ask any sports team out there, right? Not always do you win the championship. Not always do you cross the finish line first. But you can rest assured that you did your very best, then you can count that as a personal success. And what's most important about owning your success is celebrating and enjoying those successes. Far too often we have a moment, we do something really, really well, and then all of a sudden we're off to the next thing because we can't celebrate that we just accomplished something. More often than not, we're looking up this mountain that we're trying to achieve, mountain of goals or status or whatever it is, income, positions, whatever it is, we're looking up the mountain. We're not looking at the individual plateaus and celebrating, look how far we've come. We're focused on how far we've got to go. So keep a record. Again, as I talked about earlier in the journal, keep a record of positive feedback and praise that you receive. I've got a drawer here in my office, and it's filled with little notes that I've gotten over the years. And these notes have come from corporate executives all the way to elementary school kids, thanking me for a talk that I did, thanking me for helping them solve a problem, thanking me for helping them launch a business, helping them figure out a challenging situation they were having at home, thanking me for helping them in a challenge they were having in their marriage. I keep all of those. And one day recently, I was having a pretty tough day. It was really, really tough for me. And I get to work that day and I walk in, I'm on campus, I walk in the office and I look at my little cubby of messages, and there's a note from a student that I had a previous semester saying how the semester had been tough for her, but how she always had a smile when she came into my classroom, and that the little things make a difference. That was what I needed for that day, because I realized although things hadn't gone the way that I wanted, it had been a tough day. There were some other concerns that were much, much bigger going on at that time on my campus, that I knew I had to be present. I had to be there. I had to be that positive impact for someone else. So I want to leave you with this. And many of you all have heard this before, but again, as a man or woman thinketh, so they are. So I encourage you, never, ever give up. Never stop believing in yourself. You are wonderfully and uniquely made for a purpose that only you can decide to fulfill. No one else can determine your destiny. Just don't stop believing and pushing. Trust me when I say you got this. You got this. You got this. So let no one else tell you you're not worthy, you do not belong here, you do not have enough experience. And especially if that someone that's telling you that is inside your own head. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. I encourage you to follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook under Cedric Newburn. I'd be delighted to have conversations with you, and there will be more podcasts to come. Please share your feedback if you have comments that you'd like to post. Also on YouTube as well. Feel free to leave a message in the comments. And if there's some topics that you'd like for me to unpack for you, I'd be delighted to do that as well. Thank you. And that's enough said.